Company president hears intern speaking 9 languages. His reaction changed the future of the business. Richard Thompson was walking down the company hallway when he overheard a conversation that made him stop in his tracks. The intern from the administrative department was explaining something to a janitor in a language he recognized as Mandarin. It was Michael Davis, that quiet young man with glasses who had been working at the company for 3 months. Richard hid behind a pillar and kept watching. Within minutes, he saw the young man assist other employees, speaking German with a technician, then Japanese with a secretary, and even French with another co-worker. Each conversation flowed naturally, as if Michael had been born speaking all those languages. "Excuse me, Michael," Richard interrupted, stepping out from behind the pillar. "Can I speak with you?" The young man turned pale. His glasses slid down his nose as he nervously adjusted the folder he was carrying. "Of course, Mr. Thompson, did I do something wrong?" "Quite the opposite. Come with me to my office." Michael followed the president, his legs trembling. He was sure he was about to be fired. Maybe someone had complained that he was chatting during work hours instead of focusing on his tasks. The president's office was on the top floor of the commercial building in downtown Manhattan. Richard closed the door and gestured for Michael to sit. "How many languages do you speak?" he asked directly. Well, a few," Michael stammered, pushing his glasses up again. "Wo de Mingzi shi, Richard," Richard said in basic Mandarin. "How would you respond?" Michael took a deep breath. There was no hiding it now. "Hen gauxing ren shi nin, Richard Xiansheng. Wo shi Michael," he replied fluently. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Richard. I'm Michael." Richard leaned back in his chair, impressed. His Mandarin was basic, learned in executive courses, but the young man's response sounded perfect. "What if I spoke in German?" "Ich würde Ihnen gerne antworten," Michael answered without hesitation. "I'd be happy to respond." "Goodness, how many languages do you actually know?" "9, sir. English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Mandarin, Japanese, and Russian." Richard shook his head in disbelief. How could a 22-year-old intern, the son of a housekeeper, speak 9 languages fluently? "How did you learn all this?" Michael looked down, fidgeting with his hands. "My mother, Sarah Davis, has worked as a housekeeper for over 20 years. I grew up in the homes where she worked. Many families had foreign executives, diplomats, kids studying abroad. I'd listen to their conversations, ask questions, beg them to teach me words." "And that was enough to make you fluent in 9 languages?" "Not just that. I spent every afternoon at the public library. I'd check out books, dictionaries, study for hours. When the internet came along, I watched videos, chatted with people from all over the world on apps. I've always had a knack for languages." Richard stood and walked to the window. Below, the city of New York buzzed with people of all nationalities. His company provided services for international clients, but always relied on expensive, sometimes unreliable outside translators. "Michael, how would you feel about working in the international department?" "Sir, I'm promoting you. Starting Monday, you'll be our translation coordinator." Michael was stunned. It was more than he had ever dreamed of. I don't know what to say. "Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson. You can call me Richard. We're partners now." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. But not everything would be as simple as Richard imagined. The following Monday, when he announced Michael's promotion during the executive meeting, the reaction was explosive. "Is this a joke?" snapped Frank Wilson, the human resources director of 15 years. "An intern being promoted straight to coordinator?" "Frank, you've seen his skills," Richard tried to explain. "Skills? Richard, this kid doesn't even have a college degree. How is he supposed to run an entire department?" "He speaks 9 languages fluently. That's worth more than any diploma." "Maybe to you," interjected Elizabeth Thompson, Richard's wife and the company's administrative director. "But what about protocols? What about hierarchy? You can't just invent promotions because you were impressed by a trick." Richard felt the tension in the air. Elizabeth was visibly upset, and he knew why. She had promised the international coordinator position to Brandon, her nephew, who had just returned from the United States with an MBA. It's not a trick, Elizabeth, it's pure talent. Talent that hasn't been tested in real situations, she shot back. What if he fails? The whole company is at risk. Then let's test him. Michael, who was at his new desk organizing his first documents, received a call to the meeting room. When he entered, he felt everyone's heavy gazes on him. Michael, Richard said, I want you to coordinate Thursday's video conference with our Japanese clients. It'll be your first official task. Of course, sir. Richard, I'll prepare. Perfect. Elizabeth, can you give him all the details? Elizabeth forced a smile, but her eyes gleamed with something Michael couldn't decipher. Of course. Michael, come with me. In the days that followed, Elizabeth bombarded Michael with impossible tasks, complex documents to translate under unrealistic deadlines, obscure protocols to memorize, technical details even the most seasoned executives didn't fully grasp. Michael worked late into the night every evening. His mother, Sarah, would come home from work and find him hunched over stacks of papers at the small kitchen table in their apartment on the outskirts. Son, you're working yourself to death. Mom, this is my chance. I can't waste it. But look at you. Thin, with dark circles under your eyes. This isn't living. It's temporary. Once I prove myself, things will get easier. Sarah sighed. She had worked her whole life so her son could have opportunities she never did. Seeing Michael finally get a real shot made her proud and worried at the same time. On Thursday, the day of the crucial video conference, Michael arrived at the office 2 hours early. He reviewed every document, tested the equipment, and prepared backup translations for possible technical terms. At 10 in the morning, executives from a major Japanese company appeared on screen. Richard, Elizabeth, Frank, and other directors settled into the meeting room. Ohayo gozaimasu, Michael greeted respectfully in Japanese. Watashi wa Michael desu. Kyu wa duzo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. The Japanese executives replied politely. The meeting started well, but as the topics grew more complex, Michael realized he was dealing with cultural nuances he hadn't anticipated. When one of the Japanese executives used an expression that could be interpreted 2 different ways, Michael hesitated for a few seconds. He chose the more literal interpretation, but immediately saw from their faces that he'd made a mistake. Sumimasen, he said quickly. Gomen nasai. Watashi no machigai deshita. He tried to correct himself, but the damage was done. The Japanese executives exchanged glances, visibly uncomfortable. The meeting ended earlier than planned, with vague promises to review the proposal. As soon as the video call ended, the silence in the room was heavy. Congratulations, Richard, Elizabeth said sarcastically. Your prodigy nearly cost us a $5 million contract. It was a small mistake, Richard tried to defend. Small? Frank stood up. Did you see the Japanese delegates' faces? They were offended. This kind of mistake could ruin our reputation in the Asian market. Michael was devastated. He knew exactly where he had gone wrong. It wasn't about language, it was cultural context. He was fluent in Japanese but lacked experience with Japanese business protocols. Give me one more chance, he pleaded. I can fix this. There are no more chances, Elizabeth said firmly. You're going back to your internship position on Monday. Richard looked at Michael and then at his wife. Something felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint what. That night, Michael returned home defeated. Sarah found him sitting in the kitchen, his head in his hands. What happened, son? Michael told her everything. Sarah listened quietly, then sat beside him. You know, Michael, there are things you don't know about your father. Michael lifted his head. His mother never spoke about his father, only that he had left when he found out about the pregnancy. Your father was a diplomat, English, but he worked in the United States. That's how we met. I was a cleaner at the embassy. He was the cultural attaché. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he couldn't raise a child with me, that it would ruin his career. Why did you never tell me? Because I didn't want you growing up angry. But before he left something behind, a collection of books on international languages and cultures. I kept them all. I thought one day you might want to know more about where you come from. Sarah stood and went to an old cabinet in the bedroom. She returned with a dusty box full of books on diplomatic protocol, international etiquette, and business culture from various countries. Maybe it's time you learned the full truth about who you are. Michael spent the entire weekend buried in those books. He discovered details about protocols he'd never imagined, the difference between business and diplomatic formality, how to interpret not just words, but silence and gestures. On Monday, he arrived at the office determined to prove himself again. But before he could even sit at his old intern desk, Richard called him in. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you. Over the weekend, I found out something disturbing." Richard closed the office door and showed him some documents. "I had our IT team check why our official translator didn't show up on Thursday. They found messages in his system. Elizabeth specifically told him not to come." Michael felt his blood run cold. "She sabotaged my presentation." "It looks that way, and there's more. I had them audit all translations from the last 2 years. We found systematic errors that cost us million-dollar contracts, mistakes that seemed intentional." "What does this mean?" "It means you weren't the first one sabotaged. And help me understand something. Did you really make a mistake on Thursday, or was it something that could have been avoided?" Michael took a deep breath. "It was my mistake, yes. But only because I didn't know the specific protocol for Japanese business meetings. With the right preparation, it never would have happened." "That's what I thought." Richard leaned back in his chair, processing everything. "Michael, I want you to put together a full report on every translation error from the last 2 years. Use whatever resources you need." "Why?" "To find out exactly what's been happening in this company." Michael spent the next few weeks analyzing contracts, translations, and international communications. What he found shocked him. There was a clear pattern of errors, all of which benefited the same competing companies. Even worse, many of these mistakes were too subtle to be accidental. Someone with deep language knowledge was deliberately altering translations to harm the company. When he presented the report to Richard, the president stayed silent for long minutes. "Michael, what you're showing me, this is corporate espionage." "That's what it looks like. And there's more." "I managed to trace some of the patterns. The mistakes always happen in specific contracts, always benefiting the same companies." "Which companies?" "Mainly Global Answers and Worldwide Associates. Both have connections with..." Michael hesitated. "With whom?" "With Brandon, Mrs. Elizabeth's nephew. He interned at both before going to the United States." Richard felt his world crumble. His wife, the woman he'd been married to for 25 years, was involved in a scheme to harm their own company. That night, Richard came home determined to confront Elizabeth. But when he opened the door, he found Brandon sitting in the living room, drinking wine with his aunt. "Hi, Richard," Brandon said casually. "I was telling Aunt Elizabeth about my experiences in the United States." "How nice," Richard replied dryly. "Elizabeth, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Brandon, make yourself at home." In the bedroom, Richard closed the door and faced his wife. "We need to talk about Michael." "That intern? I thought we'd settled that. He goes back to his original position, end of story." "Elizabeth, I know you instructed the translator not to show up on Thursday." Elizabeth paled for a second, but quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have the messages, Elizabeth. It's all documented." "So what?" "I was protecting the company from an incompetent amateur." "Protecting the company or saving a spot for Brandon?" "Brandon is qualified. He has an MBA, international experience. Michael is just some poor kid who speaks a few languages." "A few languages?" "Elizabeth, he uncovered an espionage scheme that's been going on for years. He found patterns our auditors never saw." Elizabeth sat on the bed, losing her poise. "Richard, you don't understand. If we start promoting people like Michael, what happens to our position? To our connections? To our social circle? Our social circle is more important than honesty. It's not about honesty. It's about maintaining control. People like Michael are dangerous because they owe nothing to anyone. They don't play by the rules." Richard looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "What rules, Elizabeth?" The rules that say only an executive's child can be an executive. That talent doesn't matter if you weren't born in the right place. Exactly those rules. They're what keep everything running. Running for whom? Elizabeth stood up, agitated. For us, Richard. For our family, our friends, our social class. You want to destroy all that over an intern. I want to build something better, something based on merit, not privilege. Then you've chosen your side, Elizabeth said coldly. I hope you're ready for the consequences. The next morning, Michael arrived at the company to find his intern desk occupied by someone else. When he asked the receptionist, she said she'd been ordered to relocate all his things to the archives. Must be a misunderstanding, Michael murmured, heading to the elevator. But when he reached the executive floor, he saw Brandon leaving Richard's office, carrying a folder of confidential documents. Michael? Brandon looked surprised. I thought you'd already been transferred. Transferred where? Well, Aunt Elizabeth said you'd go back to the admin department. Data cleaning, archives, that sort of thing. Michael felt anger rise but kept his cool. And you? What are you doing with those documents? Oh, this. Richard asked me to take a look at the international contracts. It seems there were some issues with the translations. Since I studied in the United States and have international experience, I can identify where the mistakes are. How convenient. Michael, no offense, but this job requires formal academic knowledge. It's not just about speaking languages, it's about understanding business contexts, international protocols, cultural nuances you only learn at top universities. Like the university you attended? Exactly. Prestige University is no joke. Michael knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't help himself. Brandon, what's the difference between tatame and hon in Japanese business culture? What? It's basic. Anyone who studied Asian protocols would know. Brandon stammered. Well, they're Japanese concepts related to what? Look, Michael, I don't need to prove anything to you. I have a degree, you don't. You're right, you have a degree, I just have knowledge. Brandon stormed off. Michael stood in the hallway, watching the guy step into the elevator. Something about that conversation didn't add up. If Brandon had really studied international relations, he should know basic concepts about Japanese culture. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now continuing. Michael decided to investigate on his own. Using his contacts at the public library, he got access to academic databases and started researching Brandon. What he found left him stunned. Brandon had indeed studied in the United States, but not at Prestige University. He'd attended a small private college in Tampa, studying basic business administration. His MBA was a 6-month extension course, not a real master's degree. Worse yet, during his time in the United States, Brandon had worked as a freelance translator for several companies, including the same ones Michael had identified as beneficiaries of the translation errors. When Michael presented these findings to Richard, the president fell silent for several minutes. Michael, are you sure about this information? Absolutely. I have documents, academic records, even some translations Brandon did for Global Answers. Several contain the same kinds of mistakes we found here. Richard stood up and walked to the window. Outside, New York City carried on with its frantic routine, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the office. This means my wife is involved in a scheme to sabotage my own company. Not necessarily. Maybe she didn't know the details. Maybe Brandon was acting alone. Michael, you're too generous, but I've known Elizabeth for over 20 years. She doesn't do anything without calculating all the consequences. Just then, the door opened, and Elizabeth walked in without knocking. Richard, we need to talk about... She stopped when she saw Michael in the room. Why is he still here? I thought we'd settled this. Elizabeth, sit down. You too, Michael. I won't sit in a meeting with a subordinate employee. Elizabeth, sit down, Richard repeated with a firmness he rarely used. Elizabeth sat, clearly irritated. Michael has uncovered some interesting things about Brandon. Richard began. What kind of things? That his MBA was bought, not earned. That he worked for companies competing with us. That many of his translations contain the same errors we saw here. Elizabeth turned red. This is harassment. Michael is making things up to hurt Brandon out of jealousy. I have the documents, Michael said calmly, handing over a folder. Elizabeth didn't even glance at the papers. I don't care what you think you've found. Brandon is family. You're a stranger. A stranger who saved our company from losing millions, Richard countered. Richard, you're being manipulated. This boy is creating problems where there aren't any just to make himself seem important. Michael took a deep breath. He knew anything he said would be used against him, but he couldn't stay silent. Mrs. Elizabeth, if I wanted to create problems, why would I show documents that prove the mistakes? Why wouldn't I keep that information to myself? Because you want to destroy our family, Elizabeth snapped. You want to separate Richard from his own wife, from his own nephew. It's a classic tactic from people like you. People like me? People from the bottom, who have nothing and want to destroy those who do. The silence in the room was deafening. Richard looked at Elizabeth as if she were a stranger. Elizabeth, did you hear what you just said? I did, and I meant every word. Richard slowly stood up. 25 years of marriage, 25 years building this company together, and now I find out you're willing to sabotage all of it to protect your nephew's interests. It's not sabotage, it's preservation. It's about maintaining our social standing, our network, our influence. Our influence based on what? On deceiving clients? On harming talented people? Our influence based on reality, Richard. The world isn't a fairy tale where anyone can become anything. There are social classes. There are hierarchies. Ignoring that is naive. Michael felt uncomfortable witnessing such a personal argument, but Richard motioned for him to stay. Michael, tell me something. What do you want out of life? Sir, what's your goal? What kind of person do you want to be? Michael thought before answering. I want to use my talents to help people. I want my mother to be proud of me. I want to build something lasting, something that makes a difference. And you believe that's possible by working honestly? I do. Otherwise, what would any achievement be worth? Richard turned to Elizabeth. And you? What do you want out of life? I want to maintain our position. I want our family to stay respected. I want Brandon to have the opportunities he deserves. Even if that means hurting other people. If necessary, yes. Richard walked to his desk and picked up some papers. Elizabeth, I'm removing you from the executive board. Excuse me. You heard me. I can't have someone who sabotages their own company in a leadership position. Richard, have you lost your mind? I'm your wife, and I hoped that meant loyalty to our family and our values, but apparently it only meant loyalty to your personal interests. Elizabeth stood up, furious. If you do this, you'll regret it. I own half of this company. I can destroy everything. You can try, but now I have evidence of corporate sabotage. A good lawyer could turn this into grounds for dissolution of partnership due to breach of trust. Elizabeth glared at Michael with pure hatred. This is your fault. You destroyed my family. No, ma'am, Michael replied calmly. Your family destroyed itself when it chose dishonesty. Elizabeth stormed out, slamming the door. Richard stayed silent for a few minutes, then turned to Michael. I'm sorry you had to witness that. You don't need to apologize. I'm just sorry you had to find out this way. Michael, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. If you were in my place, what would you do? Michael thought carefully. I think I'd do exactly what you did. Protect the integrity of the company and the honest employees. Even knowing it might destroy my marriage? Mr. Thompson, your marriage was already destroyed. It just hadn't been acknowledged yet. Richard nodded sadly. You're right. So now what? How do we move forward? With honesty, transparency. Building a place where talent is recognized regardless of background. Would you be willing to help me with this? It would be an honor. In the following days, Brandon desperately tried to save his position at the company. He even threatened to expose secrets about Michael, but when pressed to specify what secrets, he couldn't provide anything concrete. His incompetence became evident when international clients started complaining about translations that were even worse than before. During a video conference with Germans, Brandon confused Geschäft as business with Geschenk, gift, suggesting the German company was offering presents instead of business proposals. The final straw came during a call with French partners. Brandon, trying to impress, said, "Je suis excité de travailler avec vous." I'm sexually excited to work with you, instead of "Je suis ravi de travailler avec vous." I'm delighted to work with you. The misunderstanding nearly caused a diplomatic incident. Richard had no choice but to fire Brandon. Elizabeth, furious, demanded a meeting with the other company partners. "Richard has lost his mind," she declared during the meeting. "He's promoting interns, firing family, destroying our social structure." "Elizabeth," said Jennifer Peterson, a minority partner, "can you explain why our profits from international contracts have increased by 300% since Michael took over translations? It's temporary. Problems will surface soon." "What problem?" asked another partner. "Our clients are praising the quality of communications. We've closed 3 new contracts just this week." "You don't understand," Elizabeth insisted. "It's not about numbers. It's about maintaining our social standing, our network." "Our network is growing," Jennifer countered. "Michael has connections in 9 different countries. He knows people from all walks of life. That opens doors we never had before." Elizabeth realized she was losing the battle. Her arguments about social class made no sense to partners who only saw the financial results. "Fine," she finally said. "If you want to go down this path, I'll sell my stake in the company." "Is that a threat?" asked Richard. "It's a promise." But when Elizabeth consulted lawyers to assess her position, she discovered that the documentation of sabotage Michael had gathered significantly complicated her legal situation. Selling her stake wouldn't be as simple as she imagined. Meanwhile, Michael worked tirelessly to rebuild the company's international reputation. His translations weren't just technically correct, but culturally sensitive. He knew when a German was being politely direct versus genuinely rude. He understood the difference between respectful Japanese silence and actual discomfort. More importantly, Michael began spotting overlooked opportunities. During a casual chat with a Russian client, he learned they were looking for specific suppliers for a project in Latin America. Michael connected Richard's company with the right American partners, securing a $2 million contract. Sarah Davis, Michael's mother, still couldn't believe the transformation in her son's life. When he came home on his first day as an official coordinator, she was preparing dinner in their small kitchen. "Son, are you sure this is real, not a dream?" "It's real, Mom, and it's just the beginning. I'm afraid something will go wrong. People like us don't usually get these opportunities." "Mom, people like us are hard-working, honest, determined. Why don't we deserve opportunities?" Sarah smiled, but Michael noticed tears in her eyes. "Do you remember when you were little and used to translate the boss's conversations for me?" "I do. I thought it was just a child's curiosity. I never imagined it would come to this." "Neither did I. But maybe it was fate." "I don't believe in fate. I believe in hard work and good choices." Michael hugged his mother. "Then believe I made good choices and that I'll keep working hard." That night, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Richard, but not about the office. "Michael, can I ask you a personal favor?" "Of course, sir." Elizabeth left home. She took some things and said she'll stay at her sister's until we settle the company matter. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. It was inevitable. But I wanted to ask you, do you think I did the right thing?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "Mr. Thompson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What would your father say about this situation?" Richard was silent for a moment. "My father built this company from scratch. He came from Italy with nothing, worked as a laborer until he could start his own business. He always said success without honesty isn't success, it's fraud." "Then I think you already know the answer." "Thank you, Michael. Good night." "Good night, Mr. Thompson." The following week, the company faced its first major crisis since Elizabeth's departure. A former employee approached Michael with disturbing information. "Michael, my name is Paul Roberts. I worked here as a freelance translator until 2 years ago." "What can I do for you, Paul?" I want to tell you the truth about what was happening before you arrived. Paul revealed he had been forced to make incorrect translations under threat of losing his job. Elizabeth and Brandon had run a complex scheme where accidental errors favored specific companies in exchange for bribes. Why didn't you report it before? Because I needed the job. I have a family to support. But when I heard you were investigating, I decided to speak up. Do you have proof? Paul showed emails and messages documenting the scheme, evidence that could take Elizabeth and Brandon to court. Paul, why are you telling me this now? Because I've seen what you've done, how you've transformed the company in just weeks. I want to be part of that change, not keep hiding secrets. Michael presented the new evidence to Richard, who was even more shaken. This is worse than I imagined. It wasn't just occasional sabotage. It was a systematic corruption scheme. What do? We do what's right. We hand everything over to the authorities and let justice decide. But before they could take legal action, Elizabeth returned to the company with an unexpected proposal. Richard, I've come to offer a deal. What kind of deal? I'll sell my share of the company for a fair price and walk away completely. In exchange, you take no legal action against me or Brandon. Elizabeth, you know I have evidence of corruption. I can't just ignore that. Yes, you can. It's a matter of choice. You can move forward and build something new, or stay stuck in the past, trying to punish me. Michael, who was present at the meeting, intervened. Mrs. Thompson, may I ask you something? What? Do you regret anything you've done? Elizabeth stared at him coldly. I regret not being more efficient. I don't regret trying to protect my family's interests. I regret failing. Richard shook his head sadly. Elizabeth, you still don't understand. You didn't fail to protect our family. You destroyed our family. Our family was already destroyed, Richard. You just didn't want to admit it. Why? Because we stopped growing together. Because you want to change the world and I want to preserve our place in it. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jennifer Peterson and other partners who had scheduled a meeting to discuss the company's future. Richard, we've made a decision, Jennifer announced. We want to buy Elizabeth's share and make Michael a minority partner. Elizabeth was shocked. What do you mean? Michael tripled our profits in 6 weeks. He brought in new contracts, improved our reputation, expanded our international network. He deserves proper recognition. You're giving partnership to a former intern. We're giving partnership to someone who's proven their worth, corrected another partner. Michael was stunned. Partnership in the company? It was more than he'd ever dreamed of. I don't know what to say. Say you accept, smiled Richard. It's the first smart decision we've made in years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Elizabeth left the company for the last time that afternoon. In the parking lot, she found Brandon waiting for her. So, Auntie, did you manage to turn things around? No, Brandon. We lost. What do you mean we lost? You said you had control over the company. I did, until they uncovered our scheme. Our scheme? Auntie, I just did what you told me. Elizabeth looked at her nephew and realized how childish he truly was. Brandon had never taken responsibility for anything in his life. There was always someone to solve his problems. Brandon, you're 26. It's time to grow up. Grow up how? Without the company, I have no income. Then find a job. Learn a trade. Make something useful of your life. But Auntie, Brandon, stop. Stop expecting others to fix your problems. Stop thinking the world owes you anything. Elizabeth got in her car and drove away, leaving Brandon alone in the parking lot. 3 months later, the company had completely transformed. Michael implemented a trainee program for talented young people, regardless of social background. The first class included children of housekeepers, public school students, and recent immigrants to the United States. Sarah Davis was invited to coordinate the talent identification program in underserved communities. Her experience working in homes of families from different nationalities made her perfectly qualified to recognize linguistic potential in young people. Mom, how does it feel being a coordinator? Terrified. Sarah laughed. But proud. I never imagined I'd be on the other side of the table, hiring people instead of looking for work. And how's it going? Amazing. I found a 15-year-old girl who speaks 5 languages fluently, daughter of a Salvadoran cleaner. She learned English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, and Quechua. Quechua? The ancestral language of her people. The girl translates for doctors treating Salvadoran immigrants. She's been doing it voluntarily for 2 years. Did you hire her? Better than that. Richard set up a full scholarship for her to finish high school and go to college. She'll intern here while she studies. Michael smiled. This transformation was exactly what he'd dreamed of. Richard was also adapting to the new reality. Without Elizabeth, he discovered he had much more freedom to implement changes he'd always wanted to make. The company became a benchmark for diversity and inclusion, attracting clients who valued those principles. "Michael, I want to show you something," Richard said one day, calling him into his office. On the desk was an official letter from the Japanese consulate. "What's this?" "A proposal. They want our company to coordinate translations for an international diplomatic event happening in New York City next year." "Seriously?" The consul said our reputation reached them. They specifically mentioned the cultural quality of our translations, not just the technical side. Michael picked up the letter, still in disbelief. "Richard, this is revolutionary. In 5 years working with Japanese clients, we've never received an official invitation from the consulate. How did they hear about our work? Remember that meeting you translated for Eastern Auto executives 3 weeks ago?" "I remember. One of the participants was the consul's cousin. He was so impressed that he officially recommended our services." Michael shook his head, amazed at how things were falling into place. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The company's transformation also drew criticism from competitors and part of New York's business elite. Some longtime clients canceled contracts, claiming the company had lost its standards. "Richard, we're losing our old clients," Jennifer warned during a meeting. "We're losing prejudiced clients," Michael corrected. "But we're gaining clients who value real competence." "The numbers back Michael up," said another partner. "We lost 20% of our old clients, but gained 150% in new contracts. And the quality has improved drastically," Jennifer added. "0 complaints in 3 months. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Sometimes you have to lose a few bad things to gain a lot of good ones." During this time, Michael also faced personal challenges. Some friends from his old neighborhood didn't understand his rise and accused him of selling out to the rich. "Michael, you've changed," said Joey, his childhood friend, during a meetup at their usual bar. "What do you mean, changed? Now you're the boss. How can you still be one of us?" "Joey, being successful doesn't mean betraying where I came from." "No? Then why did your mum stop working as a maid?" "Because she got a better job. What's wrong with that?" "The problem is you're becoming just like the people who've always exploited our community." Michael took a deep breath. He knew this conversation was inevitable. "Joey, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. If you had a chance to improve your life, would you turn it down?" "That's not—" "Yes, it is. You're angry because I got something you wanted. But instead of being inspired and chasing your own opportunities, you'd rather criticize me. It's not about envy, Michael. Then what is it about?" Joey was silent for a moment. "It's about fear. Fear of being left behind." Michael put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Joey, you're not being left behind. The doors that open for me can open for you too. Want me to help?" "How?" "The company's hiring. Not for executive roles, but for positions that could start a career. You have a high school diploma, you're smart, you work hard. It's a start." "You'd do that?" "Of course, but on one condition." "What?" "That you stop seeing success as betrayal. That you understand lifting each other up matters more than keeping everyone at the same level." Joey nodded, moved. "Thanks, Michael. Don't mention it. That's what friends are for." 6 months after the company's transformation, Michael faced his biggest challenge yet. A consortium of European firms was considering establishing their Latin American headquarters in the United States, but required simultaneous negotiations in 6 different languages with representatives from 12 countries. Michael, this is too much for one person, Richard said. We can hire extra translators. No, if we outsource, we lose control over quality and cultural consistency. I can do this. Are you sure? Yes, but I'll need 2 weeks to prepare intensively. Michael spent 15 days studying not just the necessary languages, but the specific business cultures of each country involved. He learned about German corporate hierarchies, French negotiation protocols, Japanese business etiquette, Dutch directness, and Italian formality. On the day of the negotiation, executives from 12 countries gathered at New York City's largest convention center. Michael coordinated translations by moving between tables, shifting not just languages but also body language and tone to match each culture. The performance was flawless. Not only were the translations technically correct, but Michael managed to capture cultural nuances that facilitated mutual understanding between very different cultures. By the end of the day, the consortium not only decided to establish its headquarters in the United States, but also offered Richard's company an exclusive 5-year contract to coordinate all international communications. Michael, said the German representative, in 20 years of international negotiations, I've never seen anyone with your cultural sensitivity. Thank you, sir. How did you learn so many specific nuances? I grew up listening to people from all these cultures. I learned not just to speak their languages, but to understand how you think. The success of the negotiation turned Michael into a national reference in international communications. Universities began inviting him to give lectures, and multinational companies sought his consulting services. But the most important recognition came from an unexpected source. During a lecture at Columbia University, Michael noticed an older woman in the audience who looked familiar. After the presentation, she approached him. Michael, my name is Catherine Brooks. I'm a professor of applied linguistics here at Columbia. Professor, it was a pleasure having you in the audience. Michael, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Have you ever considered pursuing a PhD? Michael was surprised. I've never thought about it. I don't even have a bachelor's degree. That can be arranged. Your practical knowledge surpasses the academic training of most of my students. I have a proposal. What kind of proposal? How about you complete your bachelor's, master's, and PhD simultaneously, basing your research on your own experience with corporate intercultural communication? Is that possible? For exceptional cases like yours, yes. You'd be Columbia's first doctoral candidate specializing in multilingual corporate diplomacy. Michael could hardly believe it. From intern to future PhD in less than a year. Professor, may I think about it? Of course, but Michael, don't take too long. Talents like yours don't come around every decade. That evening, Michael discussed the proposal with Richard. Richard, I'm afraid this might affect my work at the company. Michael, you don't understand. If you accept this opportunity, not only will you grow personally, but you'll bring even more prestige to our firm. Imagine having a Columbia PhD as a partner. But what if I fail? What if you succeed, Michael? You've already overcome much bigger challenges. A university course is a breeze compared to what you've already achieved. Michael decided to accept. He began attending classes at Columbia while continuing to work at the company. His routine became intense, but he was determined to prove he could balance both responsibilities. 2 years later, Michael was defending his master's thesis on intercultural communication in multinational corporate environments, a case study on social inclusion through linguistic diversity. In the audience was his mother, Sarah, wearing the first suit she'd ever bought in her life. Beside her were Richard, several colleagues from the company, and even some friends from his old neighborhood, including Joey, who now worked as an administrative assistant at the firm. Professor Davis, said his advisor after the defense, congratulations, your research opens new possibilities for studies on social inclusion through the appreciation of multilingual talent. Michael looked at the audience and saw tears in Sarah's eyes. At that moment, he remembered all the nights she came home tired from work and still helped him with his homework, all the sacrifices she'd made so he could study. During the celebration party, Richard gave an emotional speech. 3 years ago, I met an intern who spoke 9 languages. Today, we celebrate a master of applied linguistics who has transformed not just a company, but many lives. Richard, may I say a few words? Asked Michael. Of course. Michael stood up, nervous. When I started as an intern, my goal was simply to help my mother pay the bills. I never imagined I'd make it this far. But I learned something important. Talent without opportunity is wasted. Opportunity without commitment is empty privilege. Real change only happens when talent meets opportunity and is nurtured by mutual dedication. The audience applauded. Michael continued. I want to thank 2 people especially. First, my mother, Sarah, who taught me that humble beginnings aren't limitations, they're motivation. Second, Richard, who showed me that true leadership is about creating opportunities for others, not just for yourself. Sarah stood and hugged her son, tears in her eyes. I always knew you were special, son, always. Mom, we're special. Our whole community is special. We just needed a chance to prove it. The celebration went on late, but Michael left early. He wanted to walk through his old neighborhood and reflect on his journey. Passing the public library where he'd spent countless afternoons studying, he saw a group of kids doing homework at the outdoor tables. A girl around 12 was helping the others with math. Hi, Michael said, approaching. Do you study here often? Almost every day, the girl replied. My house is small and noisy. It's easier to focus here. What's your name? Sophia, and yours? Michael. Sophia, can I ask you something? Sure. What do you want to be when you grow up? A teacher. I want to help kids like these, she said, pointing to her friends. Kids who need help realizing how smart they are. Michael smiled. It was like looking at his younger self. Sophia, do you speak other languages? A little Spanish. My mom's Salvadoran, and basic English from cartoons on YouTube. Want to learn more? Of course. But it's expensive, right? Michael pulled a card from his pocket. This is my contact. I work for a company with a scholarship program for talented kids. If you're interested, I can help you apply. Sophia took the card, eyes shining. Really? Absolutely, but there's one condition. What? That you keep helping your friends, that you never forget where you came from and use your success to open doors for others. I promise. Michael said goodbye to the kids and kept walking. The circle was closing. He'd been given opportunities and now he was creating them for others. 3 years later, Richard's company had become the top name in international communications in the United States. Michael, now a PhD and majority partner, had launched the country's most ambitious social inclusion program through language education. Sophia, the girl he'd met at the library, was among the first scholarship recipients. At 15, she already spoke 6 languages and helped coordinate the program for younger kids. Joey had been promoted to supervisor and was studying business with company support. Sarah led a network of working mothers who identified hidden talents in underserved communities nationwide. Richard, transformed by the experience, became a national advocate for corporate diversity. His company was studied at universities like Prestige University as a model for social change through uplifting overlooked talent. Then one day, Michael got an unexpected call. Michael Davis? Yes. This is the English consulate. My name is Jonathan Greenfield. I'd like to speak with you about a personal matter. Michael was intrigued. Go ahead. Mr. Davis, I believe you're my son. The silence stretched. Michael's heart raced. What do you mean? I'm an English diplomat. Over 20 years ago, I had a relationship with an American woman named Sarah Davis. When I found out she was pregnant, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I abandoned her. Michael took a deep breath. Why are you calling now? Because I heard about your achievements. Because I'm immensely proud of the man you've become. And because I want to ask for forgiveness. Mr. Greenfield, I appreciate the call, but my family is complete. I have a mother who's worth 10 fathers. I understand, but I'd like to meet you in person, not to make up for lost time, but to congratulate you for the extraordinary person you've become despite my absence. Michael thought for a moment. Can you come to the United States? I can. In fact, I'm the new consul in New York City. I was just transferred. Then let's arrange lunch, but on one condition. What? That my mother is there. She deserves to hear your apology in person. I completely agree. The meeting took place 2 weeks later at an elegant restaurant in downtown Manhattan. Jonathan Greenfield was a 60-year-old man with graying hair and a dignified presence. When he saw Sarah, his eyes filled with tears. Sarah, Jonathan, she interrupted calmly. You don't owe me an apology. You should be proud of the son you abandoned, who became a better man than you ever were. Jonathan lowered his head. You're right. Michael, I want you to know that leaving you both was the worst decision of my life. But seeing who you've become, I realize Sarah may have raised you better alone than we ever could have together. Maybe, Michael replied, but now I'm curious about one thing. What? Do you still have those books on languages and international culture you left behind? Jonathan looked surprised. How do you know about the books? My mother kept everything. Those books taught me the cultural protocols I use today. Really? Really, in a way, you ended up helping me indirectly. Jonathan smiled sadly. At least something good came from my irresponsibility. Jonathan, Sarah said, do you want to really know your son? Very much. Then visit his company. See the work he does. Meet the people whose lives he's changed. Can I do that? Of course, Michael answered, and I already have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? The English consulate must deal with many Americans who want to work or study in England, right? Yes. And there must be English people wanting to do business in the United States? That too. How about a partnership? Our company can facilitate cultural communication between Americans and the English. You could help us with diplomatic protocols. Jonathan grew excited. That would be incredible. A project connecting our cultures respectfully and productively. Exactly, and it would have special meaning for our family. Sarah held Michael's hand. Son, you always find a way to turn pain into opportunity. I learned from you, Mom. The project with the English consulate became one of the company's most successful ventures. Michael coordinated translations and cultural consulting for Americans wanting to study or work in England, and for English companies interested in the American market. Jonathan became a constant presence in Michael's life, not as an absent father trying to reclaim lost time, but as a professional partner and friend. He genuinely admired the son he'd abandoned and never tried to take credit for his achievements. A year later, during the graduation ceremony for the first 100 scholarship recipients of the Language Inclusion Program, Michael gave a speech that summed up his journey. 5 years ago, I was an intern who spoke 9 languages and didn't know how to use that gift. Today, I'm a doctor, entrepreneur, and educator. But the most important transformation wasn't in my life. It was in the discovery that extraordinary talents exist everywhere, waiting only for recognition and opportunity. The audience, made up of hundreds of young people from underserved communities, applauded enthusiastically. These 100 young people graduating today are proof that origin does not determine destiny. They come from the projects, the outskirts, rural communities. Some are children of immigrants, others of informal workers. They all share one thing, talent that was hidden until someone decided to look for it. Sophia, now 18 and fluent in 8 languages, was among the graduates. She had been accepted into a federal university to study international relations with a full scholarship. Our next step is to expand this program to other states. We want to identify talent in every region of the United States, because we believe diversity isn't just about social inclusion, it's about excellence. Diverse teams are more creative, more innovative, more efficient. After the speech, Richard approached Michael. You know I'm retiring next year, right? I do. It'll be strange not having you here every day. Michael, I want to make you a proposal. What is it? How about turning this model into a social franchise? What do you mean? Imagine 50 companies across the United States adopting the same model we created here, each one identifying and developing local talent, creating opportunities, transforming communities. Michael fell silent, processing the idea. Richard, that would be revolutionary. It would. And you'd be the perfect person to coordinate this project nationally. But what about the company here? Sophia can take over local coordination in a few years. Joey can be the general manager. Sarah can expand the talent identification program. You've built a team capable of running everything without you. And you? I'll travel the world telling our story. I'll show other countries that social inclusion and business success aren't opposing concepts. Michael smiled. You know something, Richard. When we first met, you were a successful businessman. Today, you're a social visionary. And you were a talented intern. Today, you're a transformational leader. We grew together, and we'll keep growing, only now on a national scale. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching us from. If you have something to share, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Michael made the right decisions along his journey? I'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.